Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a look at the poem Kamikaze, which is the AQA English Literature Poetry Anthology. So we're going to be going through an overview of the poem, we're going to look at some of the key quotations and also some comprehension challenges to test your understanding. If you haven't done so already, please can you like and subscribe, it really does help us out when you do so. So in terms of the poem then, this is the overview. So the poem uses a third-person speaker to give the reader an impression of a story being told. Contextually, the poem deals with the somewhat rigid Japanese culture, dealing with themes such as honour and shame that it also ensues when this is not upheld. So an important thing to pay attention to before we move on is our teacher's top tip. So remember to consider alternative interpretations to achieve higher marks in your exam. Now this is particularly important with poems like Kamikaze, where multiple interpretations can be made. Look at the key themes. How do they relate to the poem? So we have power of duty, the value of life, honour and reputation, and family. Now hopefully you would have already been through this poem quite a bit. Again, this video is just to try and help you to revise some of those key themes and key quotations. So in terms of power of duty, the pilot is driven by duty at the start of the poem. So if you think about what he actually goes out and does, is all based on the fact that it is his role within the army to go and do that role for his job. The value of life. So the poem highlights the beauty of life and often uses his own experiences to highlight how beautiful and wonderful his own experiences were as he grew up. Honour and reputation. So the pilot is shunned due to his actions and is seen as being dishonouring his family. Now if you're not too sure what we mean by shunning, when someone is shunned it means they're basically discommunicated from their family or their society. They're completely removed from that kind of social aspect and almost treated as though they were dead. And then the final one, family. The pilot recalls the importance of family but is treated by an outcast due to the values of the society at the time. So context would be a really important one should this poem come up in your assessment. Before we move on as well, it's important to try and stretch and challenge yourself and think what other poems in the anthology do these themes apply to. So have a think about those key themes that we have on our left hand side and how they might relate to the other poems in the anthology. Class feedback. Check your ideas against a completed table. So here what we've done is we've actually got the same themes, how it relates to the poem, which we've already been over, but now we're thinking about the poems that this could compare to. So for the first one, we're thinking about the power of duty. This also compares to the poem Charge the Light Brigade. It celebrates the sacrifice made while the men carried out their duty. When we think about the value of life, this could also be seen to be reflected in poems like Exposure. So this describes the futility of war and the toll it has on the lives of the men in the trenches. Honour and reputation, we see this in Ozymandias. Now, it's not often that you're going to compare a war poem with one that's more about power. However, you can see there's a clear connection there, as in Ozymandias, the king was arrogant and obsessed with how he would be remembered. And then family, we have this in Poppies, a really strong theme in this poem as well. There's a clear sense of loss as the speaker of the poem details the departure of a son as he goes off to war. Now, the more you're able to make comparisons between the poems, the better you're going to feel going into that exam, because we really don't know which poem's going to come up. So as long as you can feel fairly confident about most of the exams kind of questions that could come up, so the poems that you could compare it to, then you're going to put yourself in a really good position heading into the assessment. Look at the closed passage below and identify the missing words or phrases. So you can see on the left hand side we have our passage, and then on the right hand side we have the possible words that can fill into the missing gaps. So if you'd like to pause the video here and go through it at your own time, please feel free to do so. I'm just quickly going to read through the actual passage and I want you to think about the kind of words that might go into each space. So something something in something, the poem is told in something something and focuses on a something kamikaze something who changed his mind and something home. Once home, his family blank to speak to him or acknowledge him in any way, and he is blank by society. The speaker or blank of the poem is the man's blank. So just try and have a think about what words will go into the spaces This is literally just a quick activity to get you to think about the main ideas and themes within the actual poem and make sure you feel confident with everything that happens in the actual text. Class feedback. Check your understanding against the completed example. So it says then, the poem Kamikaze was written by Beatrice Garnold in 2013. The poem is told in third person and focuses on a failed kamikaze pilot who changes his mind and returns home. Once home, his family refuse to speak to him or acknowledge him in any way, and he is shunned by society. The speaker or narrator of the poem is the man's daughter. So once you've checked your answers against the one there, I'd like to think about a stretch and challenge task and think, can you recall any key quotations from the poem? This is going to be a really important thing to do, just to make sure that you know each of the poems inside and out. The more confident you are about the quotations, the easier it's going to be to recall them when you come to the exam. Look at the key quotations and identify the missing words or phrases from each one. So hopefully you already know quite a few of the quotations from this poem. If not, don't worry about it. Going through things like this is just going to help you to retain some of that key information. So for number one then, he must have blank, which was the better way to blank. Number two, a blank head full of blank blank. Number three, little blank boats strung out like blank on a green blue blank sea. Number four, the dark blank muscular blank. And our final one, number five, as though he no longer blank. Class feedback. Check your answers against the full quotations. Number one, he must have wondered which had been the better way to die. Now this is a really important quotation because it's talking about how the pilot would have felt at the end of the poem, essentially, or the end of the journey that he took. And obviously he's turned back home, he's gone home to his family, but at the same time he's shamed them because he hasn't carried out his duties as a kamikaze pilot. Number two, a shaven head full of powerful incantations. Now this is important because a shaven head often represents purity, newborn or new life or new beginning, and then powerful incantations relates to some kind of magical, spiritual kind of sense of duty as well. Number three, little fishing boats strung out like bunting on a green-blue translucent sea, so we've got quite powerful imagery there. Number four, the dark prince, muscular and dangerous, so talking about the power of nature there. And the final one, as though he no longer existed, and this refers specifically back to how his family treated him once he'd returned home and he was shunned due to his actions. Look at the exam questions to practice writing your response. So what we're going to look at now is some typical questions that you might get based around the poem Kamikaze. Number one, compare the way the poet presents attitude to status and reputation in Kamikaze and in one other poem from Power and Conflict. Number two, compare the ways the poet presents people's feelings about conflict in Kamikaze and one other poem. And our final one, compare how the results of war are shown in Kamikaze and one other poem. Now, each of these poems do sound quite similar, so it's important that you look carefully at each question and break it down and make sure you're aware of specifically what they're asking you to focus on. If you're not too sure, do check out our next video which goes into these things in more detail as well, or do give us a comment if you're struggling on any particular aspect of the poetry cluster as well. In terms of our next lesson then, we're going to go through the following things. So we're going to recall key details from another poem in the anthology, understand the key themes and quotations, and then apply your understanding to complete a closed passage and move on to the next poem. So it's all about making sure you feel confident about that poem, that you know the key quotations and you know what to compare it to if you get it in the exam. If you need any additional support, then new videos should be added every single week. Alternatively, leave us a comment below or visit our partner channel Bookworm Teaching for more lessons and guidance on all things English. Thanks ever so much for listening, guys, and all the best with your work and revision in the future. Bye bye.